Let's call to order a meeting of the Finance Committee. And on the agenda is the approval of the committee minutes from April 10th, 2025. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. No opposition. I'll give this back to you, Judge.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before we formally get started with our Pledge of Allegiance, I do want to introduce our two new board members, and I know that they were formally introduced at the special meeting, but many of you were not at this special meeting, to include myself. But we're excited to welcome two new members to the JWB board. Renee Chia, if you would raise your hand, and then Ms. Alicia McShay. Ms. Chia is a health policy and compliance expert in the health insurance and government regulatory industries with more than 25 years' experience. She's earned her bachelor's degree in cultural anthropology and holds a certificate in applied cultural anthropology from California State University. Ms. Chia has raised two sons, now 20 and 25, and served as a proud mentor and role model to many young men in the community. Welcome. Next we have Ms. McShay. Ms. McShay is a client relations manager at Franklin Templeton Investments. Active in her community, she is a member of the Junior League of St. Petersburg, and she has served in multiple leadership positions. She is a member of the Maverick Pack of Tampa Bay. Ms. McShay has earned her bachelor's degree in communications from Pennsylvania State University. Welcome, Ms. McShay. Ms. McShay, if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have three consent items on the agenda. If I can have them. I am so sorry, that is first.
Good afternoon, Karen Boges, Chief Operating Officer. I have the pleasure of introducing to all of you our next Cooperman Bogue Kids First awardee. The Juvenile Welfare Board believes those who work to give children brighter futures deserve recognition. Today, we're honoring our newest Kids First awardee, an outstanding social service professional who consistently goes above and beyond to put children first. Gabriella Moran, you stand. You can stand too. You come right here. Come right here. Okay. Gabriella is a classroom consultant for Directions for Living's First 5 program. But let me tell you, she is so much more than that. Gabriella is a coach, a counselor, a problem solver, a steady hand for both children and educators. Gabriella works one-on-one in small groups with children who have experienced trauma. She helps these little ones build emotional regulation, self-advocacy, and confidence to stay in their classrooms and succeed. Gabriella also works closely with teachers and caregivers, equipping them with practical tools, offering encouragement, and creating plans tailored to each child's unique needs and history. Her nominator, Directions for Living Senior Director Katie Schaefer, described her in powerful words: impactful, patient, engaging, and solution-focused. And I do want to recognize that Gabriella's husband is also in the audience, Michael. So we couldn't agree more. So today, with great admiration, it is my honor. Please join us in congratulating our remarkable Kids First awardee, Gabriella.
I just wrote something really short and sweet, I promise. Thank you so much. I'm deeply honored to receive the Kids First Cooperman Bogue Award. This work, providing trauma-informed behavior analytics services to our youngest learners, is not just my profession, it's my passion. Every child we support carries a story, and it's our responsibility to meet them with compassion, curiosity, and care. It's a privilege to help them grow, communicate, and find joy in their everyday experiences. And while I hope I'm teaching them something every day, the truth is they've taught me more than I ever imagined about resilience, about unconditional love, and about strength that has nothing to do with size or age. I couldn't do this without the incredible team I'm lucky enough to work beside. Their commitment and heart makes this work both possible and joyful. And most of all, I want to thank my husband. He fills my cup so I can show up fully for these little learners who need and deserve all of me. To the children I serve now and the many more I'll meet along the way, these are my promises. I'll continue to meet the tiny hands with steady ones. I hold space for every story, every step, and every smile. And this is the work of all my heart, and I'll keep showing up day after day for the children who need us most. Thanks.
Congratulations. Next on the agenda are the consent items. Do I have a motion as it relates to the consent items?
So move.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we're at the action items. The first thing that we have is the approval of community council appointments, and that will be by Ms. Reish and Ms. Roy.
Good afternoon. I'm so honored today to present Adriana Palacio to you for recommendation to serve on the North County Community Council. Many of you may know Adriana, seen her stellar work formerly at the Maddie Williams Center, where she served as a case manager for many years. Well, the Area Agency on Aging of Pinellas and Pasco County stole her away from Maddie Williams, but she's going to do great work with them. She has been in this area for 15 years. She's got a background in criminology as well as social work. So she's also very philanthropic with her time, where she served as a board member in a nonprofit organization called Despertar de Colombia, which helps individuals and families, those with drugs and substance abuse. She's been a cheerleader for our children's mental health program at JWB, and she's volunteered in just about every avenue that JWB has to offer. I'm so delighted because she's been coming to the North County Council meetings faithfully for many years, and we're so honored that she has put her name in the pot for consideration to be a full-time council member. So, and she's with us here today, Adriana, if you'd like to stand. So, thank you so much for your consideration.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Roy, and I'm the Community Engagement Advocate for South Pinellas County. I'm here to introduce today an applicant for South County, who many of you may already know, Dr. Jane Lucas. She is very well connected in the community, so we greatly look forward to working with her. She currently works as a Director of Strategic Partnerships for Pinellas County Schools. She has an extensive career in education with experience in elementary, middle, high school, and university level. She has a bachelor's in education, a master's in orchestra conducting, a master's in education and leadership, and a doctorate in innovative and sustainable educational program development. We greatly look forward to working with her. I'm excited that she personally wants to be on the South County Community Council, so thank you.
Do I have a motion for approval?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Congratulations, ladies. The next thing on the action items will be the appointment of the interim chief executive officer, and that will be done by myself. At your packet should be a blue folder, and in your blue folder would be the resume for both of our candidates. I do know that we do have a couple people that might want to say something before we start this process, and I will allow that. The one thing that I want us to consider in our voting, and I know that it came up, but and I couldn't really hear because it was a band, not a fan. It was a band. One of the candidates made it very clear that they could not or would not accept the position if that meant that they couldn't put their name in the hat for the full position. And so I just want to make sure that we make that known, what our opinion is before we vote, because that is going to be very important to that candidate, and I told them that I would bring that up today. So we can start with any questions or any conversations, and Mr. Onks, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to have a little discussion. This is obviously an extremely important decision. It's certainly probably the most important decision we make as a board. I've had the honor of being a part of 2 prior CEO successions that both went very well, and ended up with great CEOs at the end of the day. We have 2 folks that we talked about on Monday that are outstanding, Mr. McCurrack and Ms. Minkoff. Both are extremely qualified. I received phone calls for both from people that I respect very deeply and have been involved in the community. Obviously, we've seen a couple of letters in here, I think, of support, and they're both very well known to us. I personally do not want to have to vote against Mr. McCurrack or Ms. Minkoff. And I think we have a very great alternative, which would be Ms. Bogus. Karen Bogus is our COO. She's been a JWB leader for 20 years. She is here every day. She does the job every day. Her portfolio includes the budget, the strategic plan, program oversight. When she sits down at Beth's computer, she's not going to wonder who an email's from or who she should call with a question or to resolve something. That's not to say that either Mr. McCurrack or Ms. Minkoff wouldn't do outstanding or excellent work. I think they absolutely would. We can't go wrong with either of them. I just feel like a typical process for a government when a CEO or an administrator or manager retires, if you're looking for an interim, you look internally and you look at the top, and that's, I think, typical. So my preference would be for Ms. Bogus to be the interim CEO, and then for us to formalize a search process. I don't think we need to necessarily make a decision on the search process today, but I do think we need to get it going soon. So my preference would be to pick up the search process either at a special meeting where maybe we would consider approving the contract for Ms. Bogus, or at the June meeting. Those are my thoughts, and I appreciate to hear everybody else's perspective. Thank you.
Next, we have Ms. Chi, and then we'll go to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for that option there. I'm definitely going to consider it, but I'm going to make my comments as they were without that being on the table. But that is definitely something that I think we should consider for sure. So I just wanted to take a moment by way of introduction to all of you to my professional self. Some folks might know me as my personal self or as a person of the public advocate. So I wanted to explain what a compliance professional is for those of you who may not be familiar. Compliance professionals in a corporate organization are charged with ensuring the company stays compliant with all laws, regulations, and policies from all government entities. They also ensure an organization has policies and procedures that are actually followed in operations. The program has 7 elements that were established by the OIG, which is the Federal Office of Inspector General. Ethics and privacy are generally included in the compliance program. The compliance program is concerned with actual issues of non-compliance as well as the reputation of the organization as a trustworthy entity. Compliance is required to function independently, and best practice is that the compliance officer reports directly to the board of directors, not the CEO. This establishes an independent oversight of the operation up to and including the C-suite, which is any position starting with C, like CEO, COO, CFO, etc. A good compliance program begins with establishing a culture of compliance from the top of the organization on down. It is well established that without leadership supporting a compliant and ethical organization, you will end up with neither. It is crucial that the board leadership hold itself to the highest standard in order to have trust and accountability throughout the organization. This is critical because the board is the oversight body that any issues can be raised to for fair treatment, accountability, and transparency. Without this high standard of reputation of integrity, issues will not be raised and brought forward by the organization or stakeholders, including the public. On the JWB website, under the bylaws and policies page,
there's a section header titled Code of Ethics. It reads, "At the Juvenile Welfare Board, we hold ourselves to high standards of conduct and are guided by the Florida Commission on Ethics." With that said, as a new board member, recognizing I am new and I don't have all the details on decisions or reasons for them that may have happened in the past, I can honestly say at present, the folks I have had the privilege to meet so far on the board and in the organization have been wonderful. I believe they made decisions based on their understanding at the time and with the best intentions. I believe the heart of this organization is absolutely in the right place. However, you may or may not be aware that this organization has a reputation problem. I think that should not come as a shock, but to rip off the Band-Aid in case it does, the organization and the board have a reputation for being unapproachable, elitist, and difficult to do business with. That is the perception of many in the public as well as partners and stakeholders of this organization. I heard this over and over during my exploration to join the board, as well as more recently. I would like to see that change, as I don't believe it is reflective of what I have witnessed in my very short time here thus far. However, I understand why it is the perception based on my first day here last Tuesday. The initial perception, not only from myself, but of many people in the public and community that reached out to me, is that the board's decision to appoint an interim CEO without a transparent process and then to propose delaying the search for the term of the contract was in fact elitist at best, cronyism at worst. That perception was made worse by the fact the board disregarded the request to vote on this motion for 48 hours to allow me to get up to speed on a few things and be able to provide an educated vote and discussion on the issue. I will say now to the board and the public who might be viewing that I have spent the last 48 hours getting up to speed in spite of this. I have been able to have extensive conversations with both Mike and Elise, as well as having the opportunity to speak with Beth at length. My conversations with all three of these people were exceptional, and I believe they are all well-intentioned and capable people. I had a mentor many years ago with whom I would discuss ethics, as it was an interest of mine in college as well. He made a statement that has stuck with me throughout the years, and I have strived to emulate it in my own life, and that is, the highest standard of ethics is to avoid even the perception of impropriety. Basically, hold yourself to a level of integrity, accountability, and transparency that the perception can be nothing but the utmost respect. That said, I know you are all aware of the scandals that have been reported in the news and have caused damage to the reputation of this board and the organization at large. I don't say that as a dig or criticism of any person, nor do I say that to imply I am in any way superior to anyone else. My statement is that I do believe that statement to be the highest level of ethics. As such, it is difficult for flawed humans, myself included, to reach. I said I strive because I do, but I did not say I'm perfect at it. Only one person has lived who can honestly make that claim. During my conversations in the last 48 hours, I was able to learn some of the reasons the board felt urgency to have an interim CEO at this juncture, and I believe them to be reasonable. I will support this effort, but I humbly ask the board to support a transparent effort at the end of the 10-month term, unless we go a different direction based on Brian's suggestions, to finalize a permanent CEO. I also ask that in all fairness and transparency, the interim CEO be allowed to compete for the permanent role, as I would like to see the best candidate available lead this organization and not preclude them from this competition. I believe the two proposed candidates from Commissioner Latvala to be capable for the interim role. I believe one of them rises higher when balanced against the backdrop of the perception of impropriety, and this candidate will have my support today unless we go in a different direction. I do this with a heavy heart and not saying that I do not support the other person or believe that they are wonderful and capable individuals. Well, I do not want my comments misconstrued to imply I believe there is anything unethical or problematic with any of these candidates, because I don't think that that is the case. My statements in this speech are simply to say, as a compliance professional, I believe it best to avoid potential perception or reputational assumptions that I believe are not reflective of the organization. And that is the lens with which I wanted to share all of you that as a member of this board, I will be participating and making my decisions from. So thank you for letting me speak. Thank you for your patience.
Commissioner?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On Monday, and I know that it wasn't televised, so the general public did not see our meeting, but myself and others talked about the need of a steady hand and the need of having somebody sooner rather than later serve an interim role. And we talked about that we're approaching a budget season. And we talked about uncertainty in Tallahassee with the state budget, and other things. And the three names that I threw out, just for full transparency, was Ms. Minkoff, Mr. McCurrick, and Dr. Grego. The two that rose to the top were the two that we're discussing today. And frankly, I'm a little perturbed, and I don't want to single him out because he is a dear friend, and I don't say that. I don't say that just to say that, because he is a dear friend, and after this, we'll talk about wrestling and talk about sports and the goings on in the city in which we live. But on Monday, Mr. Onks literally made the motion for Ms. Minkoff. And I thought we were going to be deciding between the two of them. And then today he throws in a third name. And frankly, I mean, I know Ms. Bogus, I don't know her well. But my comments to that, and I don't mean this with any disrespect, but since she's been brought into the discussion, I believe that if Beth thought of her as the number two, she would have been the number two long before a month or two ago. But there was another person in that role up until very recently. And so I don't consider Ms. Bogus for this role for that reason. And that's not to say anything about Ms. Bogus's capabilities or anything like that. I just have never assumed of her in this role for that very reason, because Beth was our CEO and there was somebody else that was our number two when Karen was a part of her leadership team. And so, frankly, from my perspective, I do not believe that there is a person at JWB that is capable of taking over the reins at this moment because of the leadership vacuum that we've had with the exit of not just our current CEO, which her exit couldn't come at a worse time, frankly, and she's done a good job as our CEO. But of Dr. Morrison and others that have retired and moved on, and they've deserved to retire. I don't blame them one bit. But there's a vacuum of leadership and that somebody needs to take over. And the reason why I brought up Mr. McCurrick on Monday is because he was our current, he was on the board, he was on the finance committee. We're approaching a budget season that he has been involved in every single finance meeting that we've had, and it's a temporary role, it's not a permanent role. That's not to say that Ms. Minkoff can't apply for the permanent role. That's not to say that Ms. Bogus can't apply for the permanent role or anybody else. And so, I want to make that, very clear. The search, was mentioned. And the last 2 or 3 CEOs that we've had, and maybe even more, have come from Pinellas County. Our CEO that we've had now that has done a good job for our agency is from Pinellas County. The one before that was from Pinellas County. And so my understanding is a search costs $30,000 to $40,000. I just voted as a county commissioner for a resolution for Pinellas County to work with the governor's office and their Department of Government Efficiency to guard our tax dollars and not support wasteful spending. I believe that doing a $40,000 search at the moment, when we have very capable people in our community that may be interested, would be a waste. And so I believe we should get an interim person in and then, start the search from there. I don't think that we need a 5-year interim, but if we do a 10-month interim to get past this budget cycle and get, get a little stability, then we can start a search. And if there's nobody in the Tampa Bay area or in Pinellas County that the board can find, and we have very capable people on this board that can find applicants, then we can do a search then. And one thing that I would propose, and I think it's been done before, I talked to Colleen, is that I think in this meeting, we should have, when people are finished talking, instead of having dual motions and so forth, we should have a straw poll. And it should be, we should mention the name of the person that we want to have as our interim CEO, if that's the will of the board. And then after that, we should have a motion for that person. I think it was been done before, and if y'all want to have 2 names, if y'all want to have 3 names, if y'all want to have 8 names, we should keep voting until we have 2. And so that's just my preference.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, just since I
Yes.
was mentioned, just respectfully, Commissioner, I did not make the motion for Ms. Minkoff, Public Defender Malo did.
You seconded
I
it.
did second it, and as I very clearly said, so that we could keep our options open, and I did mention Ms. Bogus as someone I highly respected and thought would be a good candidate. But I appreciate your perspective, and I also agree with the straw poll. I think that would be the easiest way to get through this, probably.
And then full candor, you mentioned 5 people on Monday. And I will say that Ms. Bogus was one of the 5 that you mentioned, so I apologize.
No, you're good.
May I make
Ms.
a
Rutland?
suggestion? Thank you. I'm hearing everybody, and I think that there might be a solution here that makes something a little easier. What if we take Commissioner's suggestion and add the search criteria responsibility to the role? And then, because I didn't see anywhere in Mr. McCurrick's desire to become the full-time. And if that's the case, then that might resolve this.
I think Colleen spoke to him.
I did speak with him, and he didn't indicate that he would pull out of the, of this if he was precluded from applying. And I don't know, I know he's had some conversations with other folks. If anybody has any further clarification, I did speak with him with some static and from a different country that he was in. So I don't know if anybody has any further insight.
So I spoke to him this weekend, and he told me that he would, in full candor, that he would serve as an interim for up to 2 years. When I made my motion on Monday, I did it for 10 months, because I think 2 years, frankly, is too long.
Well, we could always put a extension clause in there if we choose to use it.
Go ahead.
I just want to add a point of clarification that in our discussion, I think it was on Tuesday, not Monday, but Tuesday, that unanimously, I think we decided not to outreach to search if we do a CEO search, as I recall. Everyone was in agreement. In other words, we don't want to get a contractor to spend the $30,000 to $40,000 to do that, but a search effort could be done. I think we all agreed on that, as I recall, Commissioner LaPala.
There was no motion made on that, so
Yeah.
that's still on the table for you guys to discuss it. And before you decided to not establish the search process
Right.
At the last meeting, so there has been no decision made on that process.
Okay. But from people who spoke, let me put it that way, thank you. From people who did speak, I think that there's a strong desire by the board to not go the contract route, but rather to, have the search internal, which I just wanted to make that point, that I think the search could go at the same time as putting someone interim in. I don't know why that needs to wait 10 months.
I don't think that would be the intent, but Ms. Malo, you're going to be next, and anyone else that just raise your hands and I'll.
Thank you, Madam
acknowledge.
Chair. There's a couple of things that I'd like to address. First of all, I'd like to thank Commissioner Latvala for coming up with the idea of an interim. I think that's a smart idea, and I think what that does as he suggested, lends stability to the organization. So I think that's an important point. You know, there's a lot of attorneys up here, but there's a substantive and there's a procedural issue. And I think most people are echoing that no one is questioning that we are a very rich and blessed community to have such magnificent candidates to even talk about. And the people that you brought forward are great candidates. So I think that we need to distinguish the substantive from the procedural part of it. No issue with the people that were mentioned. I think all of them we would be really lucky to have. Including Ms. Boges, who was mentioned tonight. But from a procedural perspective, I think we need to sort of tighten things up, or there's a couple of things I'd like to be heard about on that. The 10-month period of the interim, I think, is a good idea to secure for stability if we find Mr. McCurrick is willing to do that. It appears that Ms. Minkoff is not willing to do that unless it led to a permanent position. But what I would add to that is the ability of the board to terminate at the end of the year. And I think Commissioner Latvala emphasizes the urgency for the budget planning criteria. So if we were to form a search committee, I have an idea who I would recommend for chair on that, have the search committee recommend to the board by the July, I think it is 24th board meeting, who the committee recommends, and then mandate that the board make a decision by the September 22nd meeting for a new officer for starting January, whoever that is. If it's Mr. McCurrick, great. If it's another candidate, so be it. That is a very similar process to, I think, the way the position has always been filled in a very shortened time period. But considering that Commissioner Latvala has probably been on more boards in 1 year than I hope to be on in my entire lifetime, I feel like if he were the chair of the search committee, things could be done very expeditiously. And I think he did note, and I think I echo that there are some very strong people within the organization that have been through this before, so it's not their first time at the rodeo as it was. And I think that there is a sentiment among the board that, hey, look, I don't know that a national search with yoga instructors is really where we need to go. And I recognize, as Commissioner Latvala will hopefully be approving my budget, that the commission has been very tight on fiscal issues and is really looking to be very conservative with that. And, you know, I would leave it to the search committee, but would echo the sentiment that if you do a national search, I don't know that you need to spend $30,000 to $40,000 on that. I think we are really lucky to have some fantastic candidates, but I think we also need to allow, to your point, the ability for whoever it is to throw their hat in the ring. I spend a lot of time, my entire career is basically reflecting on what happened in a very short period. That's how crimes happen. And in doing that, I am not a fan of not taking a minute to kind of slow down, take a breath, look at the options, give everybody that has an opportunity that wants to put their hat in the ring. But there has to be a shortened time period on that based on the timing of the resignation, and I recognize that. So my proposal would be, and this is additional motion, I don't know, Robert's Rule of Order we're a little off on that. If I need to make a motion, my motion would be is that we do vote tonight on an interim person to take office, and I don't know that there needs to be a huge interlap on that. I believe Beth's last day is July 11th, so I don't know how much of an overlap. We haven't really discussed that. I don't know if that was discussed with the candidate. It appears that Mike is really the emerging leader in that, so I think that he's probably ready to go when we want, but I think that needs to be discussed in the vote as well as what is the period. My recommendation and my motion would contain that we vote on the interim tonight, that they take office to be determined by the candidate and Ms. Houghton so that they can talk to each other, say, yes, this would be a good week for you to come, this wouldn't be a bad week, and that we leave that in her discretion as acting CEO until July 11th. What the start date would be, but no later than July 11th. And that the board reserved the right in that contract to terminate the interim president if the board sees fit, and hopefully by January 2, the board will have decided on who would be starting that January. In January and February, it's my understanding that there are significant events that happen at JWB. I think every day something is happening at JWB. But those months, I don't think require and would allow whoever the board elected to kind of, no matter how many times you've been here, when you sit in that seat, it's different. I think January and February allow them to do it. But I also think we're talking about candidates that would be ready to go in March. I don't think that the candidates that we're talking about, that I think have a strong probability of success, are gonna have any issue if they came in January, starting with the budget in March. And so, I don't know if I need to make a motion to that. If I do, if I need to bifurcate that, that is the most compound thing that I've probably ever done as an attorney. So if you want me to break it down, I'm happy to do that.
Well, there were several parts of your motion. Some
Yes, ma'am.
pertain to an interim, some pertain to a search committee, some pertain to appointing a permanent.
Correct.
So maybe we put it out for discussion and then we bifurcate it into chunks.
Yes, ma'am. I have them in boxes.
I did want to point out, Ms. Mall, that in the blue folder, I did start to prepare a draft interim contract, should you guys decide you wanted to appoint an interim. The reason I did that is because you have to approve it. And in order to avoid having to come back for a special meeting, if you came to some decision tonight, you could generally approve certain terms in there, which the way I wrote it was we can change it all as we sit here with our pens, as all the attorneys up here know. I wrote it with the 10 months, but then I did write it with a 30-day cancellation clause by either person. So if you guys decided to speed up the search process and, do it very quickly, you could terminate, or you could extend it, whatever you needed to do. So that is in there to help facilitate either discussion if you want to come to a decision tonight, and if you wanted the person to start June 1st, which I know Mr. McCurrick is available, Ms. Minkoff has expressed to me she would not be available before, I believe it was June 16th. And that way, our June board meeting is the 12th, I believe. And then our July meeting is not until after Ms. Houghton's retirement. So, there is the timing issue of all those things involved.
So as a point of clarification, the board could decide on the person, the substantive part of it, and then could the board allow the acting CEO to fill in essentially dates, start dates, things like that? I mean, the substantive part of it, I think the board would have to, are we doing a 30-day termination? But there's things in here, like on this day, we
Right.
enter into the contract. I don't know that the board needs to decide that. Can we delegate some of those boxes
Yes.
to the CEO?
So do you want to speak to that, Beth?
I just want to speak to the flow of work during the year for JWB. 1 month isn't the same as the other. And generally, and Robbie, you correct me if I'm wrong, we are beginning serious work towards the next year's budget by March. And so if you had, following Ms. Mallow's comment, if you had someone in place early January so they could figure out the place, and that would be true for any of the candidates you've talked about, to become more familiar on the inside as to what happens, to be out in the community and meet, go to some of our funded agencies and get to know those people, to be known by the staff, and any other orientation they might need. Then in March, they would be much better prepared than if they're hit the ground in March, to help lead a good and complicated budget process to be able to give you what you would want to see during the rest of the budget process. But it does start that early.
To answer your question about the contract, yes, if you, the board, decide on the material terms of the agreement, the term, the cancellation, the compensation, those things, you can approve it in form and delegate to the board chair, the CEO, or myself to finalize the details about start date, and then we would not have to come back to reapprove it. If things are still amorphous and you need to see the whole contract again, or finalize terms, or different terms come up, we will either have to set a special meeting or put this on the June agenda.
Thank you.
And there's just one point of clarity that I want to make as it relates to Ms. Minkoff. She is the candidate that said that if we couldn't offer her something permanent, then she would wait for the permanent. In her position now, they will allow her to take the job for the 10 months. Anything over that, they might have to start searching for someone to replace her. So I don't want the board to think that it's 10 and done with her. And when I spoke to her on yesterday, because she did call me, she seemed like she was all in, but I wanted to make sure, because I don't want someone to take a job, to lose a job over a maybe. But she has spoken with her boss, and they will keep her seat open or something comparable to her seat open for at least the 10 months, and then they would have to have conversations after that. Okay. Commissioner, I saw your light first.
Yeah, so just for a little bit of clarification on the reason why I did the timing of making this 10 months, and I didn't talk about it the other day, because I didn't want to really bring attention to it, but since Ms. Malo was talking about ending this the end of the year, the reason why I did 10 months, and our state attorney may have realized this, was that brings us to April 1st, and it's a budget process that is much more important than our budget process. It is having to do with Tallahassee session. And I believe that we should have a leader in place that when Tallahassee is talking about property tax reform, and the chief will know this, there's been numerous bills targeting special districts and so forth. We should have somebody there that could go and speak to it. And particularly somebody respected in the halls of Tallahassee to go speak to it and share JWB's story. And if we have somebody in place for 4 months and then have somebody else new, that, you know, that goes right to the instability of what we've been talking about. If we just keep changing leaders and all that kind of stuff. And over the weekend, when I knew we were going to have a meeting, I called somebody that every single person in this room would know, and very respected, and somebody who cares very deeply about JWB. And I asked them if they would be interested in being our interim CEO. And they said, absolutely not. And I said, thank you. And I said, well, what about our permanent CEO? And this person that every single person in this room would know, somebody who has been interested in JWB prior and has been interested in being the CEO of this agency. They said, I'm not sure. And I said, why? And they said, there's no stability there and there's uncertainty. And so that's why I keep talking about the instability and uncertainty. And so, like, we need to be an agency that has been proud. And, you know, we've been here for 75 years. And, you know, and we should be an agency that people would want to lead. And we've had tremendous leaders that have served as CEOs. We've had tremendous board leaders, Bernie McCabe's, the Bob Dillingers, I mean, icons in our community. And people that, I mean, just look out in the hall, Miss Edmonds. And, you know, we shouldn't have to be able to, or we shouldn't have to try to sell ourselves. But we're at a point that we're gonna have to, to what Ms. Chia was saying, we have to kind of have some rehabilitation. And I think as board members, we need to recognize, hey, there's some issues. There's some community rehab that we have to do. And to do that, I think we need to have some stability, but not somebody that we're gonna have for a month and kick out the door and say, oh, sorry, we told you you're only gonna be here for a month. Now we gotta have somebody else and we gotta have a search. And why do we only have yoga instructors signing up to be our CEO? I mean, we should have icons wanting to lead this agency. And, you know, somebody that was a CEO of the St. Pete Free Clinic, and, you know, things like that. And so, I mean, we gotta really build up what we want to attract. And I think that's what we're missing here.
Do we have any more comments? And I have a comment before, go ahead, Ms. Malo, go right ahead, no.
Yeah, I think the points are very well taken from Commissioner Latvala, and I think that that fits into the timeline that I've recommended. So if you send someone to Tallahassee that's an interim person, they're talking to people then after the session is over that may or may not be there. And so I think the 10 months really extends the instability. That's why I've asked for, and in one of my motions would ask for an accelerated time to find that permanency, and not have a 10-month period where we have an interim person and we don't really know who is going to be the leader at the end of that 10-month period. So my recommendation is to shorten the interim period and not pop someone out of the interim while we're searching, leave the interim person in place until the decision, based on the timeline that I set forth, you would have a decision for who would start in January. So you would have a short interim, and then you would have stability, and that person from January 4th would be able to say, I am the leader, these are the things, and this is part of my vision. And I think that that lends to the stability that you so correctly have pointed out is needed.
Ms. Chia, go right ahead.
Thank you. I support that idea because I think the process does need to be transparent. I think everything you've said, Commissioner Latvala, is very true. And, you know, the stability is an important part of the reputation. But I think having a shortened period to then say, okay, this is our permanent CEO is a better approach, and having that be done in a transparent way rather than us appointing someone and then just saying, okay, you know, this important job and this job that people, you know, might really be passionate about and want to compete in, you don't get to compete in it because we're just going to pick them. I don't think it's so much the what as the how that we do it that's important.
Well, as someone who was on the board during at least one search committee, it was very transparent. And yes, we got yoga instructors, but we also got some top-notch people that did not make the cut because they were not homegrown. And so if nothing else, for the almost 10 years that I've been on this board, we have been transparent. Have we always got it right? No. Have there been some scandals? Probably yes. And if we had it to do all over again, would we do it differently? Yes, we would. And so I would stand with anybody on this board on any day of the week and say, kudos for what you have done for JWB. So that needs to be said, number one. But as it relates to stability, it goes beyond the stability of what the community sees. We have to remember that there are people that work here. They need stability. And it's those everyday people that are not in this boardroom that makes it happen, makes JWB look good, that we owe it to give them somebody that will stay here and to give them some stability, because whether we know it or not, they're stressed right now because they don't know what their tomorrow would be like. And we're looking for a CEO, but we're looking for 2 other positions. And I could tell you this, I don't know if we could get those other positions, because would you take a job if you don't know who you're going to work for? So there's a lot of things going on here. And so to the staff, what I can promise you this is that we will work hard. And yes, we're having these conversations right now, and I think these conversations are great. But we will work hard to make sure that we can get JWB back to the stable place so that you guys can be comfortable in your workspace to do the great job that you always do. I did see someone's hand. Go ahead, Mr. Onks, and then Chief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I completely agree with what you've said, and you know, I certainly agree with what else has been said. But we have been very, very transparent, and we do have a lot to be proud about. And the instability, I think, doesn't come from anything that the organization has done. I think the instability comes from the fact that we have 2 open positions, and now we have to make some decisions. And so, who wants to come be the COO or the CFO if we don't know who the CEO is going to be? So I get all of that is all true. And so to get to the point of the term, I think, you know, what Commissioner Latvala and Public Defender Malo said is correct. Like, The term to me would be not to exceed 10 months with the option to terminate earlier if we find the right person. When we found Beth, it took us 2 tries. So we don't know what we don't know yet about who's gonna apply and how that's gonna go. So we might need more than 10 months. We might need 12. I doubt we'll need more than 10. We'll probably need more than 5, might need 6. So I think it's realistic we'll have someone by January 1st, but we might not. So I would support a not to exceed 10 months with an option to terminate earlier if we find the right person. In terms of the search, again, I don't know we need to get into all that today. I think let's get our interim together, let's get the contract done, and then let's maybe talk more in detail about how that search committee looks. I think we should set up a search committee of the board, and that has been done in the past. We did hire a consultant in the past, Mary Grace Duffy, who used to work here. So it was kind of like an inside consultant almost. We do have a consulting firm right now that we're paying taxpayer dollars to fill positions for this organization. Can you explain that a little bit? That's SGR, right?
Yes, we currently have 2 open positions that our search firm SGR is looking for the candidates after we were unsuccessful doing it on our own. We still do have a contract with Ms. Duffy's organization, although she's no longer local. Back when she assisted in 2019 or 2018 through 2019, I guess, we had a different arrangement with her because she was local. So there are several options. It's always been the search committee of the board who has taken that lead in doing the search. It would be awkward to have HR staff searching for their own boss. And so the search committee has always taken the lead. Yes, the HR department has administratively assisted, whether it was Ms. Duffy or prior, before we hired Ms. Lancaster, or when we had Dr. Biddleman in between, and then prior was Ms. Lancaster. So there is precedent for having outside help to assist the board because you all have many, many things, and otherwise the chair of the search committee would be spending an untenable amount of time doing this, and so there is some outside assistance that's always been needed. But you can do really whatever you feel is best this time. You could also start off in one direction, and if you're not getting what you need, Mr. Onks, you could then move to the search firm for assistance. So. It's food for thought.
So and just on that point, so again, I don't think we need to get into the weeds on the search committee today. I think it'd probably be better in June, or maybe if we have a special meeting if you want, but maybe at the June one to talk about the search process. But so what are those 2 positions we're filling, and how much are we paying SRG or SGR, whatever they're called, to do that?
Right, they're roughly $25,000 each. It's the chief communications officer, and then it is the controller.
So, I mean, just
per position, yes.
So just so everyone's aware, we were paying $50,000 of taxpayer dollars to fill the chief communications officer and what was this other position?
The controller.
Controller.
And if in the packet that I had provided for Tuesday night, Monday night, whatever night we were here this week, that is listed in there. There is, and that was in the large printout that was at your place also. And it also included the costs that other search firms charge other local governments. And so that is on the very reasonable end of the spectrum for search committees, or search firms rather.
Chief?
Thank you, Judge, and thank you for your comments there. Spot on where we need to be at. One thing we've got to keep in mind about the interim person is they also have to have some time with Beth, right? Come next month, she's gone in a month, 30 days. They need 30 days with Beth. And then when we hire somebody, they need time with that person as well. There's a transition that has to happen. It's not we hire someone and the interim guy's out, interim girl, whoever it is. It doesn't work that way. It requires a transition on both ends of that interim person. 10 months, I think, is a good time to think about that. And if it happens faster, that's good for us if we can make it happen faster. But with the 30-day out in the contract, we're very safe with saying 10 months to do this. Because if we find someone in 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, we can use a 30-day clause. Once we get the transition done, after that person's hired, we can use the 30-day clause to remove the interim person. So I think we're on track. I think we're all on the same page with what's going on. So we just need to be clear about that and clear about how the training works as well.
I just wanted to comment on a few things. I concur with most of what was said. I would be fine with allowing the interim to have the opportunity to apply for the full-time job. That doesn't bother me at all. As we move forward and get to a motion eventually, I think what Sarah said about giving the opportunity in the contract to terminate, that's pretty standard for all boards. I would be willing to delegate the board chair and the attorney the right to finish up that contract with some not-to-exceed standards in there. But I want to just mention that, you know, Beth didn't resign on Saturday. She told us about this a while back, and so there's been a lot of research and things that have gone into this, and one of the reasons why I supported the motion on Monday was because of that need to accelerate, as Chief just said and others have said, and the need for stability. Judge, I thought you very well articulated your comments about the staff, and I certainly have heard a lot from that. My staff at the school district works a lot with Juvenile Welfare Board partners in the community, and so it's been uneasy for them, and I suspect that's why we have a standing room only crowd today. I thought it was to hear Commissioner Latvala, but I suspect not. I think it's for that. So I think that the expediency with which we talked about on Monday and are talking about again today is important to note, and I would prefer not to see us come back in June to then discuss the contract and go back and then do it again. I think what Chief just referenced about some overlay on the front end, overlay on the back end are really important. In terms of the Tallahassee conversation, and certainly Commissioner Latvala and others have far more experience than I do in this area, but it is an early session, I believe, next time, and so you're talking about earlier ways, and so expediting that search process, I think, is good. And I think that, you know, the person that is chosen may or may not have influence over whatever happens in Tallahassee, as we've all learned in our own respective jobs as well. And so with that, I would love to move forward with a motion to choose someone soon, today, delegate our board chair and the attorney the opportunity to finalize that contract with some not to exceed, and to have that person start work very, very soon.
Thank you, and I think we're probably about ready to vote on it, but I do have one question about the contract, and I do think the delegation is appropriate, and I would second that or add that as the addendum to the motion. It does say the employee acting interim effective whatever date we practice, I guess it would be June 1st, in accordance with the procedures and its bylaws, approve the terms in this agreement. I'm not aware of what the bylaws recommend for appointing an actor or interim. I'm assuming it's a motion, a second, and then a vote by the board by majority.
So the bylaws do not speak to appointing anybody as acting or interim, and I did not know if you wanted to call the person interim or acting, which is why that says that on the document at this moment. And so it would just need a majority vote. If you are appointing a regular CEO, you need 7 votes to appoint at 1 meeting or 6 at 2 meetings, just like similar to the City of Clearwater and the County Commission does. But since this is not your permanent or regular CEO, the bylaws don't speak to it. The other issue from a governance standpoint is there would need to be a motion to provide the interim with the authority to act in the full scope of the CEO with respect to what's in the bylaws, the board policies, and the personnel policies. And then the other guidance that we would need would be not only the term, but if the compensation is the same as Ms. Houghton's. And if you look, there's just some differences because the person is a temporary employee, they're not entitled to certain things. So I did insert under benefits some paid leave during the 10-month period. But those would really be the guidance that we would need to be able to finalize the contract here today.
So my recommendation then would be just to remove the language in accordance with the procedures and bylaws, because our bylaws really don't provide procedures to vote on an interim.
The only thing I would say is down below, are you looking under duties?
Page 5, and this is for the juvenile.
Okay, thank you.
As acting/interim.
Yep.
And then it says in accordance with the procedures in its bylaws. And since that is not accurate, I would
Yes.
just ask that provision be deleted.
Yes, it is also under the duties on page 1 because there are certain duties articulated for the CEO under the bylaws. Thank you.
Ms. Flynn, because there have been especially from Ms. Malo, there have been some hodgepodge motions here. Could you help us break that down so that we're in accordance?
Sure. So
Okay.
I don't know that Ms. Malo made a formal motion, so I would
Okay.
suggest that you all maybe start with a motion on the interim, appoint, who you would select for the interim, then we confirm the terms that Judge, you and I can finalize with whoever is selected. And then your third motion would be what you would like to do, whether it's push it to the June meeting to establish a search committee, or what you would like to do with respect to that process.
I think in terms of the interim, I think we agreed to, on some level, Commissioner Latvala wanted to do a straw poll. I think that's what we agreed to do.
You are permitted to do a straw poll outside of a motion, so you could all discuss and say, my preference is so-and-so, and then based on, what the board's pleasure is, someone could then make a motion to appoint the person as the interim CEO, and then there could be a second, and then you could vote on that.
Okay, so I guess we'll do a straw poll, and would you do the poll for us?
I can take the notes.
Ms. McShay, you have to hit your button.
Sure, and I'll just give a few background comments because I haven't said anything yet. I was going off of, I did a lot more research and talked to both names that we had thrown in from Monday night in regards, hadn't even considered Ms. Bogus, so, nothing against there, no ill feelings there. So with thinking through there, taking a look at what I've seen, I did have also kind of to what Ms. Chia went through, just some different perceptions, things that have come up. Who I was leaning forward and going through with was Elise, with just the names and everything that I know, just how I know her perception in the community, the people that she knows. Just recently, last week, I saw that she was an honoree with the Fabulous Ladies based on her philanthropic and everything in the community, and so that's why I'm kind of leaning with her.
And for me, again, being new, Ms. Bogus, I didn't get a chance to speak with you and get to know you, so I feel like that's a little bit unfair, but, and as a compliance professional, I tend to lean towards process. The same process should stay in place until you actively make a change. So I want to thank Mr. Angst, how you say it?
Either way is fine.
Okay. For suggesting that, because, my heart goes there, but having not had the chance to really get to know you and consider you for this position, I'm going to stick with, who I had vetted and made, my comments regarding. So I'm going to support Elise Minkoff.
I was hoping at this point that we would have a little more clarity on if this person is going to be involved in the search or not. And I feel like that wasn't really decided upon. Before I answer, could anybody give me some feedback on that?
In what way? In what way would they be involved in the search?
Well, just in a way that would preclude them from
Oh.
applying, so that's why I'm.
My preference would be not to put any restrictions on the applicants. I think we should have all our options on the table, and I think that's what Mr. Hendricks said as well.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with that.
Okay. At this moment, I'm leaning towards Mike McCurrick.
Elise.
So of course, I'm going to make some comments on this. Sorry. My understanding of what we're voting on was Commissioner Latvala's motion to have Mike McCurrick appointed as the interim. And so based on that motion, I vote in favor of that. I do want to point out that that is not a vote against Elise Minkoff, and that is not a vote against Karen Bogus, and that is not a vote against anyone else who wants to throw their hat in the ring.